All right, so get ready, because today we are going deep into a legend. And it's a chilling one, that's for sure. The Headless Nun of New Brunswick. It's one of those stories that just sticks with you.
You know, it's always gotten to me, this story, how it kind of mixes up history and folklore, even the paranormal, all centered around this shadowy figure, and a mystery that seems like it'll never be solved.
Yeah, it's a real head-scratcher. And speaking of shadowy figures, we've got a pretty interesting mix of sources for this deep dive. We've got online articles, local legends, even some things we picked up from paranormal podcasts.
Yeah.
It's almost like this story's haunting the internet itself.
Oh, absolutely. And as we go through all of it, you'll see they don't always match up. Every version of the legend, it's like it adds another piece, a different angle. It's like we're putting together a puzzle. But some of the pieces are, well, missing.
Okay, so let's start with the pieces we do have. Who exactly is this Headless Nun? Well, a lot of what we found points to a Sister Mary in Canoe, which I looked it up. It basically means Sister Mary Unknown. She was a nun in Miramichi, New Brunswick, way back in the 1800s, and get this, we don't even know her real name. Like, it's lost to history.
Yeah, that missing name, it just makes the whole thing even more mysterious, wouldn't you say? It's like the story's fighting back, you know?
Yeah.
It doesn't want to be known.
I know, right? It's like a mystery novel, but the main character's already a ghost. And then on top of that, some stuff we found mentions a Sister Marie. Is this the same person? Maybe people just got the name wrong over time. Or is this a whole other part of the legend we have to, untangle?
Well, there are some people who study folklore who would probably say it doesn't matter who she was as much as why people keep telling the story. Think about it. It's that fear of whoever attacked her, not some specific person from history, that really grabs you, doesn't it?
Okay, so we have a nun. She's a total mystery. Even her name's gone. But what really happened to her? Because that's where the legend gets really interesting and honestly, a little creepy.
Oh, yeah, for sure. We've got a few different versions here. Some say she was attacked by some crazy person. Others say it was sailors who wanted buried treasure. There are even stories about bandits who wanted her to tell them some secret.
It's like a historical mystery, but with a ghost story on top.
And it's not even clear how she died. Some say she was beheaded. Others describe something else entirely. But there's this one thing that's the same in every version. Sister Mary, or Marie, she's always headless. And nobody ever finds her head.
It's pretty disturbing when you think about it. Back then, before DNA and dental records, cutting off someone's head was a pretty effective way to make sure nobody knew who they were. That historical context, it just adds another layer to the whole thing, don't you think?
Oh, definitely. It makes the story feel more real somehow. And you can't forget, that detail, the missing head, it's really important to why the legend is so popular. It's what makes it so creepy, so memorable.
It's like the ultimate cold case. But instead of a detective, we have a ghost who can't rest easy. All because she's looking for what's missing. The stories say that's why she walks, the Headless Nun. Her spirit's searching for her head.
That's classic ghost story stuff, right? Unfinished business. It's like the theme you see all the time, the idea that a ghost is stuck here because of something they need to do, some problem they need to fix.
So let's say, just for fun, she does find her head. What happens next? You think she can finally move on, find some peace? Or does being without your head for that long, does it change a spirit somehow?
You know, that's a question people have probably wondered about for, I don't know, hundreds of years. Some people think finding that missing piece would let her finally rest. But others say even if they were back together, her spirit might be stuck to the place where she died. What do you think?
You know, I went to a supposedly haunted lighthouse one time, didn't see any ghosts, but the feeling there was so strong. All those stories, it's like you could feel the past in the walls. Maybe finding her head wouldn't change the Headless Nun story so much as, add a new chapter to it.
So we've got this spirit, right? She can't rest. She's missing her head. And we have all these questions with no answers.
Yeah.
But where exactly is she looking? Let's talk about some places.
Right, good point. We've got these two main spots in New Brunswick. French Fort Cove, which, from the pictures I've seen, it's a beautiful place, but also supposedly super haunted. And then there's Nuns Island, which, come on, even the name sounds like it belongs in a ghost story. You know, I've always been fascinated by ghost stories, and one thing I've noticed is that headless figures, they pop up all over the world. What makes this New Brunswick one so special, do you think?
Well, one thing is that the landscape in New Brunswick, it kind of adds to the power of the legend, you know.
Yeah.
These places are full of history, which always makes these kinds of stories feel more, more real.
Okay, so let's start with French Fort Cove. Everything I've read says it's like the main place for Headless Nun activity.
Yeah, it's one of those places where you can almost feel the past, the people who were there before. And that history, it creates a space for legends to grow.
And you can't forget how beautiful the Cove is, even without the ghost stories. It's the kind of place that makes you want to just sit and take it all in, maybe stay a little too long. It's like the land itself is holding on to secrets.
That's it, yeah, that double feeling you get with these haunted places. Beautiful, peaceful, but also a little unsettling. Like there's something else there watching you, but you can't see it.
And it's at French Fort Cove that people say they actually see her, the Headless Nun. They describe this ghostly figure moving through the shadows, always searching.
Right, but even those sightings, they change from person to person. Some say they saw her clear as day, in the full nun's outfit and everything. Others, they just saw a quick flash, something out of the corner of their eye. It's almost like the legend itself changes, depending on who's looking.
But even with those differences, there are some things that are always the same. The white clothes, the missing head, that feeling of searching, of longing. It's like the legend, it's more than just a story. It's like a force or an energy that people are connecting to.
Well, that's a cool way to think about it. And sometimes people don't just see her. They hear things too. Weird sounds, whispers carried on the wind, footsteps coming closer, and then nothing. Imagine that you're walking along the cove at night, moon's out, casting all these shadows, and you hear footsteps behind you. You turn around, and there's nobody there.
Yeah, it plays into those fears we all have, right? The fear of the unknown, of being watched, of something out there, something we can't see, reaching out from, well, wherever ghosts come from. Okay, so French Fort Cove, it definitely fits the whole haunted location thing, but what about Nun's Island? What's the story there?
Nun's Island? It's smaller, more isolated,
Yeah.
which in some ways makes it even creepier. People say that Sister Mary, or maybe it was Marie, she spent some time on the island. Maybe she was looking for some peace and quiet, or maybe she was running away from whatever danger led to,
What's interesting is that researchers think the island got its name after the Headless Nun stories started going around. Makes you wonder, right? If the stories we tell actually end up changing the places themselves.
Wow, that's a really cool thought. It's like the stories and the places, they're connected and they shape each other. People who've gone to Nun's Island, they often talk about feeling her presence there, this feeling of being watched, of a spirit that's stuck between worlds.
Okay, so we've got these two places, both full of history, both full of mystery, and both supposedly haunted by the Headless Nun. But where's the proof? Is there anything concrete to back up these claims? Or are we just talking about spooky stories and people letting their imaginations run wild?
That's the thing with these legends, right? The evidence is mostly from people. Stories they tell, experiences they've had, stuff passed down through families. It's not the kind of evidence that science can really, measure.
Which, I'll admit, can be pretty convincing, especially when you hear the same kinds of stories from so many different people. Different backgrounds, different times. It makes you wonder, is there something real at the heart of it all? Something that makes people have these shared experiences?
Exactly. And even though we might not have scientific proof, there's something powerful about those shared experiences, about the fact that so many people believe that something unexplainable might be happening in these places.
And it's that mystery, the chance that there's something more to the world than we can see or touch. That's what keeps these legends going, don't you think?
I totally agree. And the Headless Nun, with her tragic story and the way she never stops searching, she's like the perfect example of that mystery. She reminds us that there are things we can't explain, things that don't make sense, things that might exist beyond what we currently understand.
And maybe that's the real reason this legend is so popular. It's not just about ghosts and scary places. It's about how much we don't know. The questions we don't have answers for, the mysteries that keep us looking over our shoulder, peering into the darkness.
Speaking of darkness, let's change gears for a second, because the Headless Nun, she's not just about scares and haunted spots. She's had a big impact on the culture of New Brunswick, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. You can't talk about New Brunswick ghost stories without mentioning her. She's like a local celebrity, a symbol of all the history and folklore there. It's like she's part of the place itself. And it goes beyond just telling stories around a campfire.
You're right. She's become part of the local economy. People come from all over because they want to experience something supernatural, to walk where the legend walked. Think about all those ghost tours they have there, the books, the documentaries. They've even made podcasts about her.
It's almost like she's the official spokesperson for New Brunswick's haunted past.
And a pretty good one, too.
But it's not just about making money, is it? There's also a sense of respect for the legend. People recognize how important it is to the culture.
for sure. The Headless Nun is a part of what makes New Brunswick unique. She reminds us that stories, even the sad and scary ones, they can have a real impact. They shape who we are, and they bring people together.
And it makes you think, how many other places out there have their own versions of the Headless Nun? Their own stories about spirits that can't rest and mysteries that are never solved. Stories that become a part of their communities.
That's a great question. It makes you realize these stories, even though they come from specific places, they all tap into these universal themes that everybody gets. No matter where you're from, the fear of the unknown, the need for answers, the wanting to connect with something beyond this life. Those are human experiences that go beyond borders.
And the Headless Nun, with her sad story and the fact that she's still out there, she embodies those experiences in a way that, I don't know, it keeps us hooked. It's like her story is a mirror showing us our own fears and fascinations.
That's a great way to put it. And maybe that's why, even after all these years, her story is still being told. Because it speaks to something deep inside us, something that draws us to the mysteries of life and death and what comes after. But maybe instead of trying to solve the mystery, we should just accept it.
You mean just go with the mystery, the questions we can't answer.
Exactly. Instead of being afraid of them, we should see them as a chance to explore, to question, to keep our minds open to the possibility that there might be more to this world than we know.
Now that's something I can get behind. So, as we finish up part 2 of our deep dive, let's take a second to think about what we've learned. We've explored the legend of the Headless Nun, we've looked at the history, we've gotten a little spooked by the haunted places, and we've even talked about how she's become a part of New Brunswick culture. But there's one big question left. What can we learn from this scary tale? What's the message here? Stick around for part 3, where we'll try to figure out the deeper meaning behind the legend and what the Headless Nun might be trying to tell us about ourselves and the world we live in. All right, we're back. This is it, the final part of our deep dive into the Headless Nun. It's been a wild ride, that's for sure. Kind of like putting a puzzle together. But this puzzle has pieces of history, folklore, and some things that, well, we just can't explain.
It's really amazing how a story like this can change over time. It gets new meanings, new layers. And it becomes part of a place, like woven in.
Yeah, exactly. We started with this mysterious nun, Sister Mary, maybe Sister Marie, lost in time, but people haven't forgotten her. We talked about the different versions of her story, those spooky places where she seems to hang out, and how the whole legend's become so important to the people there. But as we wrap this up, the question is, what do we learn from all this? What's the point of a story like the Headless Nun?
Well, one thing is that it shows how powerful stories are. How a simple tale, passed down over and over, can really grab our attention, make us curious, even make us think about big things, like life and death.
It's like those stories, they become part of us, They connect us to the past, they help us face our fears, and maybe they even help us make sense of the world when things are confusing.
It makes you wonder about the stories we tell ourselves, too. The way we try to explain things we don't understand. Because let's be real, there's no real proof that the Headless Nun even exists. No pictures, no recordings, nothing you could take to court.
But people keep seeing her, right? Hearing her, telling her story. It's almost like the legend itself is a kind of proof, don't you think?
Yeah, it's proof that people believe. Proof that we need mystery. Proof that we're drawn to things we can't explain. Maybe it's not about proving or disproving ghosts. Maybe it's about accepting that some things will always be a mystery.
I like that. Accepting the mystery, the questions we can't answer, the things that hide just out of sight. It's like the Headless Nun's daring us to be okay with not knowing everything. To stay curious, to keep looking for answers.
I think so too. She reminds us that some things just don't make sense. Things we might never understand, no matter how much we try to figure them out. And maybe that's okay.
Maybe it's the not knowing, the questions that stay unanswered, that keep us going, keep us exploring, keep that sense of wonder alive. And that makes life so much more interesting.
Exactly. Maybe the real lesson here is to be open to things that seem impossible, to admit that we don't know everything, and to look at the world with curiosity and, a willingness to be surprised.
So, as we close the book on the Headless Nun, I think it's safe to say she's way more than just a spooky story. She reflects our own hopes and fears, our obsession with the unknown, and our need to understand the world, even the parts that stay hidden.
Well said. And who knows, maybe one day we will find out what's really behind the legend. But until then, let's enjoy the mystery, the chills, the power of a good story.
And hey, if you're ever in New Brunswick, maybe swing by French Fort Cove or Nuns Island. But just a heads up, you might hear a dress rustling or feel a cold breath on your neck. Sleep tight.